You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
I usually say welcome back, everybody, but maybe this is your first time listening to the Dodge Movie Podcast. So welcome.
Welcome.
I am so excited. So we are recording this just a few days after watching In the Heights, which debuted on HBOMAX and in theaters on June 11th. This will be airing on July 4th, so happy Independence Day, everyone.
Happy Independence Day, 4th of July, America Day.
Yeah, kind of interesting that this movie just happened to land. The reason I picked this movie and the reason I picked it today to launch is it's kicking off our month of musicals.
Yeah.
I'll start by the definition of a musical. I did a little bit of research because I remembered this from film school. The genre had taken a new turn with the production in 1927 of Showboat. It was the first musical to provide a cohesive plot and initiate the use of music that was integral to the narrative, a practice that did not fully take hold until the 40s, with all of the musicals that a lot of people recognize, like Carousel and The Music Man and...
One of my favorites.
I was just going to say, help me out, Mike. You know them all.
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
State Fair.
Hello, Dolly, maybe was that era? I don't know.
A little bit later because it's got Babs in it.
Okay, true. So that's the difference between a movie that has music in it, kind of like maybe A Star is Born, and a movie that they use the music numbers to
basically dialogue
propel
is sung,
right?
right?
Yeah, that's the word, to propel the story. So there's dialogue integral into the narrative. That is the big linchpin of a musical. And we had quite a heated debate in the Dodge household last night. I mean that in the friendly way, of talking about what movies were considered musicals and which were not.
So Penn Jillette talks about how a tomato is really a fruit, but it is treated as a vegetable in a culinary sense. And I would argue there are movies that are technically not musicals in that the dialogue is not sung, but the viewer considers them a musical because there's so much music in it and the music is a part of the milieu, of the story, right? And that's in some sense diegetic versus non-diegetic, but I think when the characters sing in a movie, I think the viewer considers it a musical. That's my thought.
Oh, I think, yeah, that's a common, yes. I think there's like the technical film student or film nerd
right
kind of thinking, and then just general audience thinking.
I would be curious to know what students of musical theater, maybe a musical theater major, would think about this. Annie Bell, if you're listening, go ahead and shoot us an email.
Yeah, we take emails, Christy at dodgemediaproductions.com, or our phone number that I'll give out at the end of the show. So
you can also hit us up on Instagram or carrier pigeon.
There you go. All forms are welcome for Miss Annie Bell. So this movie, I don't know if people know this, but a little backstory. Lin Manuel Miranda could not get a part. And so this predates Hamilton. And he wrote this play and put it on Broadway. And it preceded Hamilton. So because of his success with In the Heights, because then it got some buzz and it became a really big Broadway success, he was invited to the White House and he was actually kind of working on some of the songs for Hamilton, not really knowing if it was a full-fledged musical or not. And I think he sang My Shot for a bunch of people, but namely Barack and Michelle Obama. And so that's where he really kind of got a lot of buzz and then wrote Hamilton, and that's how we know about him. But this was his kind of like freshman not flop.
Yeah, the breakout hit.
Yes. So this is big. And it was actually supposed to come out last June. I was all set for it. And then stupid COVID happened and they gave us Hamilton, which was great. But then it meant I had to wait a whole nother year. So I have been waiting for this for over a year and so excited it's finally here. So we are going to break down In the Heights today. Directed by John Chu. It stars Anthony Ramos, who you know as John Lawrence from Hamilton, Corey Hawkins, who played Dr. Dre in Straight Outta Compton, and I think fairly newcomers. I looked at their IMDb, and they have credits, but they're just not, stuff we would know them from. So Leslie Grace plays Nina, Melissa Barrera plays Vanessa, Olga Merendez, and Jimmy Smits.
I think he was in LA Law.
He was. He was. I had a crush on him when he was on.
With Corbin Burnson?
Yes.
Who played James Roday's father in Psych. So a little bit of Latin American kind of connection there.
There you go. It was written by Chiara Alegria and Lin Manuel Miranda, who did the stage play and, came up with the concept. The synopsis of the film is a Broadway musical in which Usnavi, a sympathetic New York bodega owner, saves every penny every day as he imagines and sings about a better life. The tagline for this film is, "Turn up the volume on your dreams," which Mike can attest to because as we watched this movie, he thought,
Washington Heights is not for highly sensitive people.
A little noisy.
Yeah, a lot noisy. So there's a lot going on, right? A lot of bright colors. So cinematographically, I'm sure the production design as well as the camera department, they went with a lot of saturation, a lot of colors. There's a lot of dancing, a lot of people moving around. From what I've seen of kind of the making of, they say that is actually accurate, that part of New York is very noisy and a lot of action, people in the streets. Yeah, just watching it was overwhelming for me. I can't imagine living there.
Right. And this film was made solely in Washington Heights and other parts of New York City. So there were no sound stages. The flavor and the culture of this neighborhood was, I think, another character. But let's kick it off with Mike's pickup line.
What does sueñito mean?
Oh, that's a sweet line. Do you want to go on to say what else sueñito means?
Yeah, so sueño is dream, so sueñito is little dream. And we find out that this is the name of the bar that the lead character's father ran back in the Dominican Republic. And it serves as something of his dream throughout the film. So it's kind of like Rosebud.
Oh, that's true. Very good. I like that. All right, let's kick it off with talking about the cinematography of this film. This film kicks off, as a lot of great musicals do, with a fabulous, big dance number and a very upbeat. Well, actually, let me back up. It kind of kicks off a little small in a way that Usnavi comes out of his apartment and we start to hear what Mike was referring to about this neighborhood being loud, that there's a rhythm to this neighborhood. The latch on the gate makes a nice chunk, and his door, and the guy cleaning the sidewalk with the hose, they all happen in a very rhythmic way. And it starts to kind of slowly let us know what we're in for. And then Usnavi goes on to describe some of the characters in the neighborhood, and it just breaks out into this huge dance number. And one thing I really loved about the cinematography is there's one point when Usnavi I think he's standing outside looking into his bodega, but the reflection is all of the dancers behind him. And it's a really great shot.
The old reflection trick. Also, I would say I don't think any movie that's set in New York City is allowed by law to be made without those opening visuals from the helicopter that sweeps over across the George Washington Bridge or the harbor. Probably if you're the guy that runs the camera copter in New York City, you're guaranteed work on every film.
Yes. And I know this from when I was visiting there, they don't allow any drone shots. So you either would have to use, I guess, possibly maybe a crane shot if you maybe could rent a crane nearby. I don't know. But yeah, I bet the helicopter is the way to go to get those aerial shots in New York City.
Yeah, it looks like that's the only way that you could do it. Also, do the altitude. I'm not an expert on drone operation, but it looked pretty high up for that kind of operation. So that establishes, though, I mean, I was kind of joking about it's prohibited by law, but we expect, I think, as the viewer, that if New York City is going to be a character, which it is in this film, then we expect to be introduced to it.
Mm-hmm. As well as the other characters. And I thought this opening number, we meet Abuelita, who we find out she isn't anyone's grandma, but she's everyone's grandma and a cornerstone of that neighborhood. We meet the kind of the three women that work in the beauty salon. It's almost like they're one character because they're always together, not to diminish any of them because they're all great actors and provide a lot of color, but provide also some of that noise.
Which is really interesting because they remind me of the characters in the animated Hercules from Disney. And fun trivia, our oldest son accidentally put that on Spanish one time instead of the English dialogue. And so that was kind of hilarious to hear him talking about Hercules. So there was a nice tie in there, but it did remind me of that kind of the scolds or, kind of the chorus in a sense. Those three, they were providing some kind of comic relief and commentary.
Yes. We also meet the two. Do you feel like Nina and or Vanessa were the lead? Or do you think, I mean, Usnavi's obviously the lead, and so his love interest, Vanessa, maybe would be the lead act.
Yeah,
but I feel like Benny and Vanessa and Nina and Usnavi were like kind of on the same level. What do you think?
I think Usnavi is the lead character in this film. I would argue that the character of Nina looked like she might be the lead in the first half of the movie and then just kind of disappears. She and Benny just kind of disappear after that one dance number. And the Vanessa character, I think it really is kind of about Usnavi. And maybe that's why the story is a little bit muddled to me, because I think the stage play, there was a heavier emphasis on Nina, and I think her mother was present, and there was no one playing the mother in the film. So it's possible that when they rewrote it for the film, possibly they needed to work in time constraints. It was long at about 2 hours 20 already, and so it's possible that they had to cut some characters to make it within that time frame. But nonetheless, so to me, I think what ended up in the film was Usnavi was pretty much the lead character.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this. I mentioned in the stage play that the stage performance that I saw, at least at the Armory here in Portland, Nina was more present, being the daughter of an immigrant who worked hard, had his own business, and wants his daughter to better herself. So he sends her to Stanford. And she comes back at the beginning of the play feeling like a complete loser because she's kind of flunked out or done not so great. So I think she's on like an academic suspension because she was working like 3 jobs in order to help pay the Stanford tuition. Her story is more prominent, I felt, in the musical I saw in person. She was struggling with kind of wanting to do better than her parents did, but also loving this neighborhood that she came from. And so we had a conversation about that Dustin Morrow is going to have to settle for us when we see him soon. Is this an ensemble piece or is this a character-driven story besides being a musical?
Yeah, I think it's a musical. That's my vote.
All right, we'll see. Get ready, Dustin. So some of the other things that stood out for me for the cinematography is there's a scene where Vanessa is standing by a cooler in a bodega. She's opened the cooler to get like a soda, and she's kind of resting her head on it, and the light from the cooler is like perfectly lighting her face.
Yeah. I had a note here about clever to hide the lights in the soda cooler.
But it was beautiful. I mean, she looked great, and
well, yeah,
it worked.
It kind of did, except that the filmmakers in the audience are like, you hid the lights in the cooler.
Well, and then there was a fabulous dance sequence, very, like Mike brought up when we were talking about it, a la Lionel Richie's Dancing on the Ceiling from the 80s, where they dance on the side of a building. And
okay, so for our listeners who are under the age of 40, Lionel Richie was a pop singer, and he was a good dancer. And they had a famous music video where he was in a room that was rotating. And so it would look like he would dance up the wall and then onto the ceiling, where in reality, the gravity was constant, but the camera and the room were rotating.
Yes, and I've yet to find the behind the scenes to see if this is how they did it, but Mike is pretty sure because there were moments where you could tell by the way their bodies moved with what gravity would would produce. Mm-hmm. We think that the side of the building was rotating, and Mike said that the way that they did the Lionel Richie one is the camera was positioned, was stationed, like
yeah, it was fixed relative to the room or the wall, right? So that the frame of reference, that was constant, and it was the gravity that was moving. And if that's not how they did it, those actors have anti-gravity powers, and I'm very jealous.
And huge shout out to Christopher Scott, who choreographed the dance sequences. This is an amazingly choreographed movie in all the wonderful ways.
Okay, so for the movie Baby Driver, I did wonder if there was a cut where you would have just the driving scenes and what it would play like. I wonder what this film would play like if it was just the musical numbers, if we got rid of all the talking part.
You mean not even, like, you mean play the music, but...
Yeah, just all the musical dance numbers, just cut out everything else. I mean, obviously it'd be quite a bit shorter, but would it still make sense?
Oh, I bet it would. Oh, that'd be really curious. Yeah. Huh, interesting. What other things did you like about the cinematography of this film?
Obviously, they had a lot of saturation. We mentioned that a little bit before, but that goes kind of with the sense of a vibrant neighborhood. And in particular in the bodega. Shout out to the set dressers for that, because there's a lot of stuff there, and it was mostly really subtle product placement on the shelves and stuff. The one glaring product placement was a commercial for the Tide stain pen, which was... Okay, I mean, I know you got to pay for that big production, but wow, that was pretty on the nose there. We talked a little bit about how they hid the lights in the soda cooler. I would say that the cinematography is gorgeous, right? Really shot very, very well, professionally. And there was a scene it was a park. I think Lin mentions in a making of which park it is. I don't know. And we need to come back to the geography a little bit, but they're outside. It's obviously, a giant park, and the lighting was so soft and gorgeous and wrapping these beautiful actors. And I thought to myself, did they somehow only film on overcast days, much like the Howard Hughes film in the desert with the airplanes? Or is it just the world's largest scrim? And about the time I thought that, they cut to a shot where it was bright sunlight again. I thought, oh, no. They just got lucky and got overcast for many of the shots. But it was, I think, shot really, really well. One of the questions I had was, there's a scene here, spoiler alert, Abuela has some health issues. And I stopped the movie to talk about what was it, because they begin the shot and I instantaneously knew something's going to happen to Abuela. And my question was, what did the filmmakers do that told me as a viewer that that's what was happening? Is it a music cue? Is it a visual cue? Is it the writing? Is it the timing and the edit? Or obviously all of the above. But that was kind of interesting to me, because as a filmmaker, that's a choice that they made, right? They could have not given us those clues and we would have been startled by what happened. By giving us that foreshadowing that allows maybe the sensitive viewer, such as myself, a chance to come to grips with something's going on here. This is maybe not going to end well for Abuela. So I thought that was interesting. I don't have the answer. I wish I could tell you, oh, yeah, we always do this. We put them on the opposite third, and then we use a B minor key or whatever. I don't know what that is. I wish I did. But I wanted to kind of come back a little bit to, I mentioned the geography. I don't know New York City geography. I don't know where the neighborhoods are, what their current or past demographics were. And I felt like that actually hampered my enjoyment of the film, because I kind of didn't know what was going on at a certain level. And I wonder if our viewers from outside the United States encounter this in other films where they're not aware of the geography. So let's say I make a film one day about the evils of Californians and got to keep them out of the state or something like that. A person who was not from the Pacific Northwest maybe wouldn't have the same context about what that meant. Right. So I did wonder if I was missing something by being an ignoramus when it comes to New York City geography and demographics.
I don't think you were from, I can only speak as a tourist who was there a couple weeks. We see Vanessa get on the train and she talks about going downtown. She wants to be, kind of closer to probably the fashion district.
Again, that means nothing to me. I didn't know that downtown would be closer to the fashion district is what I'm saying.
Well, she just wants to get out of Washington Heights.
Okay.
I don't know if I see what you're saying, that you don't know the geography, but what I'm trying to say is I don't know if you need to know the geography, and what you need to know, they tell you.
Okay.
Because more than once they talked about you just get on the A train and you could be back here.
Right. I guess maybe the point I'm getting to is I don't know, as not a New Yorker, is that a big deal or is that a small deal? Is that a 5-minute trip? Is that a 25-cent trip? These are things I just don't know.
Right. No, I hear that you're saying that you don't know them, but I'm saying I don't think you need to know, and what you do need to know, because the way he says, oh, just get on the A train, it's no big deal. That's then oh, okay, it's not a big deal for her to just get on the A train and come back.
Okay. I'm bringing that up, that I did definitely feel as an outsider. And I had one last cinematography thing that after that little jag into geography, that I noticed there were a lot of continuous long shots. So the one that really stuck out in my mind is Usanavi is in what I think is his apartment, and Vanessa comes over with the bottle of champagne. And so there's a whole song and dance number, quite literally, that goes throughout the apartment, and it's one long take.
Oh, wow.
And so obviously they had a guy on a Steadicam, because it spins around enough you would see the dolly tracks. And what I think of immediately, of course, is the beginning of The Player, where that means that these poor actors had to get it exactly right for that entire sequence, right? So they did that a lot. I think it actually works really well, but boy, tip of the cap to the entire cast and crew to get those long shots.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't even notice that. like we mentioned, the writing of this screenplay is different than the original stage play.
And I haven't seen the stage production, so I am now very curious to see a stage production so I can compare the two.
You know, one thing I didn't feel was ever answered is, or at least that I missed maybe, was Nina kept seeing a little girl that I felt like was maybe supposed to remind her of herself. And I couldn't ever tell. Oh, because one thing we totally have not talked about is this movie has a very like fantasyful way about it. Like there's things that happen that, you know, like they go to the beauty shop and there's a number and those styrofoam heads that they put wigs on start singing.
Okay, thank you for mentioning that. That was in my notes as well. And the note that I made was, it's the Tiki Room at Disneyland. So if Lin or John Chu or somebody else on the production team was actually basing it off of the Tiki Room, I need to high five them remotely. That's awesome. So the movie is fantastical. Right? They're dancing up the side of a building. The styrofoam heads are tiking.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. There's that one number where I think it's Usnavi and a bunch of other guys, they're talking about something and they're making hand motions, and their hand motions, there's almost like a chalk drawing that's happening.
Which, by the way, it did raise a question I put in my notes. Is the lightsaber sound trademark? Because they make a lightsaber sound during that sequence, and
we'll find out, but probably not.
Yeah, my guess is it's like the Wilhelm scream. You can get away with it.
Yep, I think so. I think Lucas just...
Now let's see if we get a cease and desist.
Right. Lucas says, thank you for talking about my...
Yeah, I don't know. Does George own it anymore? Did he sell the rights to that?
Right. So it'd be whoever owns Disney. So anyway, I went back to the little girl. I could never figure out, is she seeing this little girl and the little girl is reminding her of herself, or is it her seeing herself? Like there was almost like a dream, like,
right.
Like I said, a fantasy type in this film that it was fun, but sometimes confusing, I will say.
Yeah, it was a little confusing. The other thing that was a tiny bit confusing, and maybe this is just me, is when some of the dance numbers, especially the ones in public places, there were a lot of characters, and I was having a hard time tracking who was doing what, dancing with whom, right? And so I kind of feel like I in some sense missed a lot of that because I was just trying to figure out what's going on. But I did notice that girl, you're right, she kind of was very present in the first part of the film and then just kind of faded away. Maybe she went to Stanford.
And one rewrite that was different in this one that I don't know if we'll necessarily go into because we like to keep things pretty light here, but I did notice even in the trailer that I saw a year ago that Lin added in one issue that I'm sure was going on when they were writing this, was that some of the characters were dealing with the cancellation of the Dreamers program, and that was not in the stage play because at the time he wrote that wasn't an issue. And so I found it interesting that the writers chose to kind of put in the film something that was being dealt with, and it was a little bit more, not that there weren't serious issues in the stage play, because there definitely were, and immigration as a topic was in the stage play, but it was interesting that specifically that Dreamers program was referenced and one of the characters was dealing with it in the movie.
I think it probably would have been better if they left it out. To me, it definitely stood out and stuck out, and I think that's such a complicated and complex issue. To me, it landed as a very simplistic, kind of almost preachy approach, whereas the rest of the film, I thought, dealt with immigration in a more nuanced fashion.
So then another big part of the film is about midway or maybe 2/3 in, there's a blackout in the whole city, which right before I went to New York City, my professor, Dustin Morrow, told us to watch, and I'm going to forget the name of it, but there's a documentary about a famous blackout that happened in the 70s. And it was terrifying because the 70s in New York City was not a fun Disney place to be. And then now there's no electricity and it was hot and it was the summer. And I'm telling you, do not watch that documentary right before you go to New York City because you realize how vulnerable, especially as a tourist, you will be.
Well, I think the last 18 months have kind of shown us that New York City is not sustainable on its own. It's teetering on the brink at all times. So I could imagine that the loss of power would really be a problem.
And it affects this neighborhood specifically.
Oh, absolutely.
They talk about we are powerless.
Which that was the first line that gets spoken after they lose power. And I thought, boy, that's true, but maybe a little on the nose. But definitely that was kind of the theme of that portion of the film, is how without power. And of course, at that time, it was summer, so it was incredibly hot. And what people often don't realize is because of the heat and humidity, that kills people.
Yeah.
And, we've got Abuela as an older person, but that's a serious thing. It's not just like, oh, we're going to fan ourselves with a piece of paper and have a Coke and a smile. That's a pretty serious event. And when you have that many people living, in such high density, that's a real serious thing. And you'd ask yourself, how could the power be out for any extended period of time in a place like New York City? You would think that, their equivalent of the power company, they'd be on that right away. But probably the demands on the grid are astounding, I would assume.
I would have thought the very same thing, because up until recently, generally the power is only out for a short time, even here in the Northwest. But in March, we had, there were some places that had like 6 days without power. And it's just like, how is it taking this long to restore power? So I do think that some areas are vulnerable to, times like this. And then add to it the weather. If it's super hot, like you said, it's dangerous.
It's a serious thing. But it is an interesting filmmaking challenge to film during a blackout because it's dark, right? The viewer can't really see things. And some of the shots, we were saying, where's that light coming from? Because in a modern setting, right, your smartphone is your portable flashlight.
Right.
That's what everyone assumes. So that would make some degree of sense. Although I'm sure there's an area for films where you take smartphones out of the picture. If somebody had a clever way to maybe isolate the characters where they couldn't use their smartphones, that'd make a good film.
Yeah, remind me to talk about that at the end.
Okay.
So I thought it was interesting, like we mentioned, that this neighborhood is so noisy. And a couple times Nina says, shh, let me listen to my neighborhood, to Benny. And so Vanessa says to Usnavi, it's creepy quiet.
Right. So when I was a kid, I grew up a block and a half from I-10. And in the middle of the night, most of the traffic seems to be semi-trailers with their delicious Jake brake downshift coming into town. And I got used to that sound, that highway sound. And if I went to a friend's house for a sleepover, it was too quiet. I couldn't sleep. It was creepy quiet. So I get kind of where she's coming from.
Yeah.
Even though I would prefer some quiet. When you get used to that, and from what I understand, in New York City, there's a lot of honking, as well as traffic noises, and probably some yelling, I would assume, when you're on top of each other like that. So that is interesting. It's like the people who listen to restaurant background noise to go to sleep, right?
Right. And so I thought it was interesting that during the blackout scene in the beginning, there's a lot of chaos and noise because people, like they get out the bingo cards because what else are you going to do but let's play bingo? And so they're yelling and fighting with people, just kind of friendly, competitive fighting over the game. And there's a lot of noise and chaos, which I can attest to when the power first goes out. Sometimes some people kind of freak out a little bit and it can be noisy and chaotic. And I thought that the way that the film handled that, and then there is kind of more of a poignant, quiet moment, and that happens just following it. And so I thought that was very interesting how they dealt with that in an editing perspective and a sound design.
So culturally, you want to avoid stereotypes, but certainly this film, with its mix of people from Puerto Rico and Cuba and Dominican Republic, it supports the idea that the Latin cultures are louder, right? Both in terms of music and in how they speak to each other and all of that. And so one does wonder what this kind of film would look like if it was made, for example, in Tokyo, right?
Right.
Or perhaps in Denmark or something like that, where there's that character, which again, not having grown up in Washington Heights, I can't argue that it's not accurate, but there is that noisiness, that bustle, that vibrance, maybe one would say. And that becomes in some sense part of the milieu that as a filmmaker you're trying to capture. And I think of when people talk about how Altman will have his characters talk on top of each other instead of a more classic pausing between so that each person gets a clear line of dialogue. And I think that's an interesting thing to deal with in this movie. And so I wonder if the sound designer had a lot of fun. Was it a super exciting challenge to try to replicate that?
I agree. I think that the neighborhood itself, like I said, has a rhythm. And I think not only that opening scene that I referenced shows the rhythm and the musicality of that neighborhood, but throughout the film, they did that. There was the ladies in the beauty shop were tapping their nails on the counter, during that song. And there were many instances where it highlighted how vibrant, like I was going to roll into the costumes here in a bit, and the costumes were colorful. The colors of all of the different countries' flags were visible, and it was a very vibrant neighborhood. What did you think of the costumes?
First of all, fanny packs are back in?
Oh, yes. You have not gotten the memo?
I have not. I was apparently fashion forward a long time ago.
Now, if you're really cool, though, it's usually a designer fanny pack, and you wear it like a crossbody. You don't wear it around your waist. You wear it like a bandolier.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just going to stick with pants with a lot of pockets, maybe. But so there was definitely some color there involved. I noticed at one point Usnavi was wearing a very cool nylon-y shirt. It looked like a soccer jersey, but it had almost like a floral print on it. That was kind of cool. A little bit of product placement. I did notice the Adidas logo. But I thought from my perspective, the costuming looked realistic without knowing that neighborhood particularly well. And there's one scene where there's a fella who definitely does not have a beach-ready body who was sitting there with his shirt off when it was really hot. And I thought, boy, mad props to that actor, right? Commitment to the role.
Now, as we know we've watched a couple of extras, that may have not been an actor.
That probably wasn't, is my guess.
Yes. Lin said that while they were filming, they would go, is that part of our crew?
Right, that's awesome.
Is that, and I agree. I think that's awesome, especially if you got the neighborhood to kind of play along and be extras without, like ruining a shot. Right. I think how cool for that neighborhood. Now you're watching the film, you're like, oh, there I am.
And you got to figure that some of them figured out where the craft services table was, right? Just help yourself to some M&Ms, guys.
They probably brought stuff to the craft services, quite honestly. Remember when
that would be so awesome.
Oh, I guarantee it. Some of those abuelitas brought their, favorite stuff.
Yeah.
Try this.
Yeah, they looked at what was
there.
Try
my tamales.
That's not going to cut it. We got to bring some real food.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I think I know the answer to this, but how about a driving review?
There was almost no real vehicular activity in this film. I will mention that early on, there was a cameo by a Shelby Cobra Mustang. That was about the most exciting vehicle involved. And Chevy was mentioned in a lyric. So that was about it.
Right. So even though Jimmy Smith's character, Kevin, owns a taxi cab company,
yeah,
I don't think any of our characters were ever in the taxi cab.
Yeah, that's right. There's some dispatching going on. There's some discussion about it. But yeah, you don't really see vehicles.
All right. And I looked this up and I don't remember any head trauma.
Yeah, I didn't make a note of any head trauma at all.
Right. Yeah. So no head trauma. And then how about, I know there was a few smoochies.
Smoochy. There was a smoochie, but as I noted, our first smoochie between Usnavi and Vanessa was 2 hours in. There's quite a ways before there was a smooch there.
But then we had a conversation. Isn't that typical of a romantic comedy? Is basically because the whole course of the film is kind of wanting to see if the two get together, and then the audience gets the payoff near the end. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say just in general, anytime you have the boy meets girl plot, that you need that payoff to be there in Act 3.
Right. But Benny and Nina...
Yes.
Benny and Nina kissed, and they even, I think, hooked up.
Right, but like I said, they kind of disappeared halfway through the film. They just went home.
So they're supporting actors.
Yeah, at least in this film, sure. Yeah.
So
I will say one thing. I don't know if there's a clever way to segue this back, but to costumes, I did make a note. As a director, I need to remember that if you set a number at a swimming pool, you can get your actors to take all their clothes off. But even better than that is the Esther Williams style dance number in the pool.
Okay, this was such a great way. I'm sorry that we haven't discussed this before now. The pool number is so amazing. They even kind of throw a little bit of a rap battle in there. And I thought, oh, Esther Williams is smiling the biggest smile in her grave right now because they brought the pool numbers back.
It was awesome. I am so proud of that. I love all the old-timey Hollywood stuff like giant pool numbers. That's just great.
It was fabulous.
And so when they rocked up to the public pool and you see Sunny, I think was the character who went like running into the water, and you see all the people, and I think, okay, this is just going to be a large crowd scene. And then there's starting to be some singing. And again, I'm not seeing it coming. And then they cut to that overhead shot, and I was, yeah, this is awesome.
It was awesome.
Yeah. So
if for no other reason, watch the movie for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Certainly. Yeah. Although they could probably find it on the YouTubes, but.
I wasn't going to say that.
Oh, sorry. Cut that out.
Okay. How about, should we go to the numbers?
Sure thing.
Okay. So, like I said, we're recording this on June 13th. So, as of today, the movie has only made $5 million. I am pretty sure that by the time this airs on July 4th, they will have made their money back and then some. The budget was $55 million, and I mean, it will be curious because it's airing on HBOMAX, but it's also in the theaters. And I, even though I've seen this, would like to go to the theater and see it on the big screen. How about you?
I'd probably go with you to see it again.
Okay, cool. Like Mike said, it's 2 hours and 23 minutes. It's rated PG-13. Like we said, it's a musical, but they also call it a drama. We did pause this twice. One to talk about acting, and one when something happens to Abuelita. I'll just say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're getting better. We're getting better. We had to break this up though, because let's see, we started it kind of late, and so we got tired. And so we started it Thursday night, finished it Friday night. So I guess that would be a third pause.
Well,
an extendo pause.
To be fair, it's not just that we got tired. We got tired because one of the comics that lives with us rent-free came in and was interacting. So it kind of postponed our viewing.
Yeah. So the IMDb score is 7.9, which is, I think, I mean, lately IMDb has been kind of low, but fairly right on. I would give it like an 8 or a 9. Rotten Tomatoes definitely gives it like a 96%, and the audience gives it 95. So people are loving this movie. What would you give it?
I'd probably give it an 8. Spoiler alert, I think I probably liked Hamilton a little bit better.
Yeah.
But it was a fine film.
It's fun. It's a fun film. All right, you guys. So give us a call and let us know what you think. If you have any questions, our phone number is 971-245-4148. And I have a favor. We are doing college films for September. We have 3 picked. We need one more. So I thought, well, why not ask our great audience? So either drop me a line at Christy@DodgeMediaProductions.com or give us a call at that phone number and give us a suggestion for a college film.
Including any people working in the industry who are from Oregon. So, Katie Sackhoff, Maria Thayer, Sam Elliott. You guys, go ahead. Shout
give us
out.
A call.
Yeah, give us a call. If you're back home visiting, you can come by. We'll have you in the studio.
Yeah. Studio D.
Yeah, Studio D.
Also, we're running a contest for the month of July. All of those that have left a review and continue and will leave us another review, or leave us a review, please, we will enter your name into a giveaway, and we will pay for a month of a streaming service of your choice. So that's a free month of Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max,
Peacock, I guess, would be in there. Paramount.
Yeah, Paramount, Amazon Prime, like whatever. You pick it, we will pay for a month of your streaming service for whoever wins that giveaway. So leave us a review, like us, subscribe, find all our socials. Like, just help us out, everybody.
Give us some love.
Yeah. So this kicks off our month of musicals. Next week, we're talking about Pitch Perfect. The week after that, we will be talking about a big favorite in this household, The Greatest Showman. And we will finish off the month with the film La La Land. So don't forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to DodgeMediaProductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.